Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When 6 mysterious trucks appeared on his private lot, Joel Reynolds thought it was a mistake. It wasn't. What followed was a war of property lines, power-hungry HOA leaders, and one man's refusal to back down. This isn't just a story. It's a suburban showdown for the ages. I arrived that morning just after 8. The air was thick with Georgia humidity, the kind that made your shirt cling before you even reached the front gate. I was sipping lukewarm coffee from a travel mug I should have retired a decade ago when I turned the corner and saw them. 6 of them. 6 goddamn trucks, big boxy white monsters lined up like they owned the place, taking up every square foot of my concrete delivery pad in front of Warehouse 12B. Bright vinyl decals on the side read Cotton Ridge HOA, Community Development Initiative, as if putting HOA in big letters made trespassing look charitable. At first, I just stood there in the gravel lot, staring. I even blinked a couple of times like maybe I was hallucinating. Nope. Still there. A few drivers were standing around smoking like it was a truck stop. One had propped his boot on a tire, scrolling his phone like he was waiting on fries. I stepped out of the truck and walked over. "Excuse me," I said, keeping it civil. "What the hell are you doing on private property?" The guy with the phone barely glanced up. "Karen said we could unload here. HOA storage. Said it was fine." "Karen who?" He looked at me like I'd just asked who the president was. "Karen Lambert, HOA president." I felt my jaw tighten. I didn't know Karen Lambert personally, but the Cotton Ridge development backed up through the tree line behind my southern fence. I'd dealt with a few of their residents before, mostly polite but entitled. HOA types always had a habit of forgetting that not everything was under their control. "This is not HOA land," I said, gesturing around me. "This is my warehouse complex. I own it outright. You're parked illegally." The driver shrugged. "Boss lady said it was all good. Said you wouldn't mind for a few days." Of course she did. I went back to my truck, pulled up the site security app, and scanned the camera logs. The front gate had been opened with a generic delivery code. Not uncommon, some of my long-term renters used that code when they had scheduled drop-offs, but none of them had trucks arriving today. Not even close. I dialed the HOA office line listed on their website. Straight to voicemail. "Hello, this is Joel Reynolds. I'm calling regarding unauthorized Cotton Ridge vehicles currently trespassing on my property. I need someone from your office to call me back immediately. You're occupying private space, and I am not part of your HOA. I expect full cooperation. Thank you." Click. I waited and waited. An hour passed. Then another. Around 10:30, a pearl white Mercedes SUV pulled up to the gate and buzzed in. My office assistant, bless her early bird punctuality, let them in before realizing who it was. And then she stepped out. The Queen of Cotton Ridge herself. Karen Lambert wore crisp white linen pants, expensive sandals, and oversized sunglasses that probably cost more than my security cameras. 2 assistants trailed behind her like interns following a senator. She smiled like she was walking into a lunch date, not a confrontation. "Oh, hi there," she said cheerfully, like I was a neighbor she'd borrowed sugar from last week. "I'm Karen Lambert. We spoke indirectly." "Not quite," I said, arms crossed. "You parked 6 trucks on private commercial property without any form of notice or agreement." Karen gave a little laugh, the kind rich people use when they're pretending they didn't just slap you. "It's just for a couple of days," she said. "We're installing new furniture in the community center, and the delivery contractor screwed us. No storage space. I figured, well, you weren't using this lot, and it's right here. Convenient, right?" "It's convenient for you," I said. "For me, it's a liability, a violation of access rights, and a huge insurance headache. These are commercial storage units. I have contracts, cameras, gates." "You didn't ask." Karen's tone shifted ever so slightly, like she was explaining math to a toddler. "Well, Joel, let's not be difficult. This is for the community. It's not like we dumped garbage here. These are assets. We're all neighbors after all. I assumed you'd understand the spirit of cooperation." "You assumed wrong." She gave me a tight-lipped smile. "I'm sure you wouldn't want to make this harder than it needs to be. If something were to get misplaced or damaged, it could become a real tangle to sort out." "Just saying." That did it. "You've got until sundown," I said, pointing at the trucks. "If they're still here after that, I'm closing the gates and treating them as abandoned property." Cameras are rolling, by the way. And anything left behind becomes part of an incident report. Karen arched a brow and glanced toward one of her assistants. Then she looked back at me, still smiling like she was hosting a charity gala. Well, good luck proving anything gets damaged. She turned on her heel and walked back to her SUV, hair bouncing like it had choreography. I stood there a minute, watching her drive off, 6 illegal trucks humming behind me in the Georgia sun. They had no idea what kind of storm they'd just stepped into. By 6 o'clock, the trucks were still there, not just parked, entrenched. No signs of movement, no apologies, no phone calls. Just 6 metal behemoths squatting on my concrete like they owned the place. I drove back from the diner, unwrapped the foil on a half-eaten patty melt, and stared at the gate monitor on my dashboard, chewing slowly. All right then. I pulled up to the keypad and tapped in the override sequence. A deep mechanical clunk echoed through the steel gateposts. My system wasn't your average warehouse fence. I'd invested years ago in a federal-grade programmable perimeter setup, automated locks, backup generators, and a cloud-synced camera array that fed directly to 2 redundant off-site servers. If they wanted to treat my property like a free-for-all, they were about to meet the full extent of a federal contractor turned pissed-off landlord. I made one more call to the sheriff's office, this time to Deputy Sandlin, who I'd worked with before, on a theft incident years back. Gave him a calm, detailed explanation. Unauthorized vehicles, suspected trespass, owner not present, no contract, no permissions. He said he'd send someone over within the hour. While I waited, I got on the horn with a couple of my regulars, a local labor crew that handled furniture transfers and confidential cleanouts. Paid well, showed up fast, no questions asked. Within 40 minutes, 2 box trucks and 4 guys in gloves and steel toes were backing up to Warehouse 12B. Everything in these 6 is going into Bay 12, I told them, handing over an inventory checklist I'd drafted while waiting. Label each load as unidentified third-party freight. Secure it behind padlocked roll doors and slap barcode trackers on every pallet. Document every item. Owner, one of them asked. Unknown, left unattended on my private lot. You tell me. We got to work. Truck by truck, they cracked the rear gates and started unloading. It was like a garage sale for entitled morons. Office chairs and shrink wrap, smart TVs, faux marble countertops, rolled AstroTurf, a pile of unused signage for something called Cotton Ridge Wellness Pavilion. Not a single shipping manifest in sight. No labels, no claims, just a chaotic mess of HOA hubris. As each truck was emptied, I documented the process with my phone, my warehouse cams, and a handheld 360 degrees camera I usually saved for insurance audits. I wasn't taking chances. By 8:30, everything was offloaded and sealed. I keyed the security doors to lockdown mode and set temporary access permissions to owner only. Then I shut the front gate and engaged the motor lock. No trucks, no access. When Deputy Sandlin arrived, I was waiting for him with a USB drive, a fresh cup of black coffee, and a stack of printed stills showing the trucks entering the property. I greeted him with a firm handshake. Evening, Joel, he said, eyeing the now empty parking lot. So this is the HOA situation? Cotton Ridge decided my lot was the community junk drawer, I said, handing over the drive. There's your entry time stamps, license plates, and a cute clip of their president promising to leave everything here for just a couple of days. No contracts, no rental agreement, not even a damn sticky note. Sandlin watched a few clips on the SE tablet in his cruiser, then gave a low whistle. Yeah, that's a hell of a presumption on their part. I'd call it unlawful use of private commercial space. Think we've got grounds. I'll file the incident as criminal trespass and unauthorized use of property, he said, taking notes. You've documented everything to hell and back. We'll issue a formal notice to Cotton Ridge HOA, and I'll send dispatch to arrange tow service for the trucks. Owners got 72 hours to contest. After that, county impound. Perfect. An hour later, a contracted tow company began winching the last of the empty trucks onto flatbeds. I stayed outside the whole time, arms crossed, watching their precious HOA fleet ride off toward the county lot with flashing hazard lights and that hollow, defeated clunk of shame. No one from Cotton Ridge showed up. Not a single apology, not a peep. Just 6 stolen parking spots, 6 trucks full of furniture now legally in my custody, and a whole HOA that clearly thought I'd roll over like a doormat. The next morning, I was halfway through my second coffee when my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Reynolds, said the voice on the other end, clipped and venomous. This is Karen Lambert. I've just been informed you confiscated HOA property and towed 6 trucks. You've made a very serious mistake. I took a long sip. Morning, Karen. You are in possession of Cotton Ridge community assets. That's theft. No, Karen, I said calmly. It's called secure containment of abandoned property left without authorization. And last I checked, calling the cops doesn't exactly scream authorized delivery. I demand you release our furniture immediately. On my property, I said. You'll need to prove it's yours first. And even then, you're paying for storage, handling, labor, and security costs at commercial rates. You can't do that. I already did. There was a long silence on the line. I could practically hear her calculating whether to threaten or grovel. Good luck explaining this in court, she said finally, voice flat. I smiled. I was about to say the same thing. A week later, I got served. I was eating a turkey sandwich on the loading dock, half watching a storm crawl in from the west, when some poor guy in khakis and a visor handed me a manila envelope like it was anthrax. Civil suit, filed by the Cotton Ridge Homeowners Association. Claim: unlawful seizure of property, theft of community assets, and willful destruction of protected materials. Total damages requested $67,000. I laughed before I finished reading the first paragraph. The document read like it had been drafted by someone who'd watched too many courtroom dramas and thought trespassing meant sharing. They accused me of everything short of kidnapping the trucks. Apparently, I had exercised unlawful dominion over community enhancement resources and violated cooperative spirit expectations, whatever the hell that meant. I called my attorney, Martin Ellison, the moment I got back to my truck. Martin was an ex-Marine who'd become a real estate litigator after getting tired of watching developers screw over veterans. He answered before the second ring. "Tell me it's not from Cotton Ridge," he said. "It's from Cotton Ridge." On a scale of 1 to HOA, how insane are we talking? Full HOA. By Friday, we were in Cherokee County Civil Court for the initial hearing. Karen showed up in a beige power suit, like she was auditioning for a failed Senate run. She had 2 attorneys in tow, plus a man with a briefcase I'm pretty sure was just there to look important. I wore jeans and a clean shirt. Martin wore a dark blue blazer and that permanent no time for bullshit face he kept in his toolbox for HOA cases. Their side opened with passion. Karen's attorney, a stiff with shiny shoes and 0 neck, claimed I had violated community trust, seized property without due process, and caused irreparable distress to the development timeline of a vital community facility. He actually said that with a straight face. Karen sat behind him with her legs crossed, chin high, like she was waiting for an apology that would never come. Martin stood up, adjusted his cuffs, and began with the phrase, "Your Honor, this is a masterclass in suburban delusion." Then he laid it all out: video footage, gate logs, lack of written permission, photos of the trucks, timestamps, the fact that I had followed protocol for abandoned property on private land, Georgia Code Title 44, Section 12. He even showed the court the digital inventory we'd created when unloading the items, all labeled, sealed, and untouched. Karen's team scrambled, trying to claim I knew the property was theirs and had refused all attempts to mediate. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Did you attempt any contact before leaving the trucks?" Karen leaned into the mic. "I believed it was implied cooperation." "Ma'am," the judge said slowly, "property law doesn't run on implication." Then came the twist. Just when we thought the hearing was winding down, Karen's second lawyer stood up, holding a rolled-up document like a magic scroll. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe that Mr. Reynolds's warehouse facility is, in fact, within the original boundaries of the Cotton Ridge development, designated as a utility buffer zone on the 1994 preliminary zoning map." The courtroom went quiet. I turned to Martin, who blinked once and whispered, "Well, that's a new one." Karen looked smug again. Her lawyer continued, explaining that due to clerical oversight and historic misfiling, my property may have technically been part of an HOA expansion plan approved back in the Clinton era. They requested an injunction, immediate halt on all further actions involving the stored materials until land status could be clarified. The judge, to my surprise, granted it. "You've got 72 hours to provide documentation," the judge told me. "If there's a zoning discrepancy, we'll need survey verification." Outside the courthouse, Karen strutted past me like she'd just sunk my battleship. "Old boundaries are still boundaries," she said sweetly. I'd double-check your title if I were you. Martin and I didn't say anything until we were in the truck. He looked out of the windshield for a moment and muttered, "She's throwing spaghetti at the wall, but if any of it sticks, we'll need a damn good surveyor." I spent that night drinking cheap bourbon and flipping through every property file I had stored in my gun safe. Deeds, plats, surveyor's maps, every dry government PDF I'd ever filed since buying the lot back in 2007. It was all there, in black and white, stamped and notarized. And yet, in court, that smug lizard Karen had managed to toss a 30-year-old zoning map onto the table like it was Excalibur. The next morning, Martin got me in touch with a geodetic survey firm out of Atlanta. Small outfit, highly rated, mostly ex-military guys who didn't mind crawling through briars with laser scanners. They agreed to a rush job, which meant double the price. I told them I'd pay triple if they could shut Karen Lambert up with math and maps. They arrived on site 2 days later, 4 of them in khaki vests and wide-brimmed hats, looking like they were about to track poachers. Their lead, a guy named Don Whitaker, had worked on boundary disputes across 4 states and spoke with the slow precision of a man who knew people like to argue with facts. We started with the basics: GPS coordinate locking, LiDAR scans of the property lines, satellite overlays from the past 20 years. They cross-referenced everything with the Cherokee County tax assessor's records, the U.S., Geological Survey, and historical zoning approvals going back to the 90s. The process took the better part of a week. They combed the edges of my southern perimeter, where the tree line met the HOA's manicured backyards, using high-accuracy GNSS receivers to pin every stake. I watched Don mark each reading with a red flag and make tight notations in a leather-bound field book, like a man carving the truth into stone. 3 days in, he called me over. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, pointing to a digital topographic render on his tablet. "Your property line stops here, just before the slope. Everything south of this belongs to Cotton Ridge. Everything north, including your warehouse, driveways, and the entire concrete pad, is 100% separate." Meaning their map is wishful thinking. Turns out, the buffer zone on Karen's antique zoning map was never officially filed. It was part of an unapproved expansion plan, drafted, rejected, and shelved in '95. County records had 0 filings for any annexation past the Southern Creek line. Even better, the parcel I bought was originally designated for state logistics during a military supply reroute project. It had federal stamp origins. Don gave me the final report in a sleek folder, complete with a signed statement, geo-coordinates, and a notarized map that looked like something you'd use to start a war. We sent digital copies to Martin, who nearly burst out laughing on the phone. "She tried to beat you with a crayon sketch," he said. "You brought a sniper rifle." Back in court, Karen's lawyers tried to stall, claimed they needed time to verify our survey. The judge took one look at the paperwork and raised a brow. "This includes USGS data." "Yes, Your Honor," Martin said. "And a federal origin parcel trace." Karen sat still as stone, her mouth tight, hands clasped like she was praying to the HOA gods. The judge ruled swiftly. "Cotton Ridge HOA has no jurisdiction over Mr. Reynolds' property. The attempted claim of boundary inclusion is unsupported and administratively false." Boom. With that, the injunction was lifted, and I was formally cleared to proceed however I saw fit with the property, including the impounded goods. HOA's entire legal theory had just evaporated like piss on pavement. Outside the courthouse, Martin shook my hand. "They're gonna scramble now," he said. "You pulled the rug out mid-step." I nodded, watching Karen across the lot. She stood beside her Mercedes, arms crossed, talking furiously into her phone. Her posture said power, her face said panic. I got in my truck, closed the door, and for the first time since this whole circus started, I smiled without a trace of tension. They'd tried to shift the ground beneath me. Too bad I'd already fortified it. It was just past 2 in the morning when my phone buzzed. Not a call. A silent alert. Zone 12B. Motion detected. I was already half awake. Light sleeper by nature. Worse since this HOA crap started. I reached for the tablet next to my bed, swiped open the security feed, and tapped into the IR cam mounted above the roll-up doors of Warehouse 12B. There they were, 3 figures in dark hoodies, moving low, fast, and quiet. One stood lookout near the gate while the other 2 crouched by the lock mechanism. I watched one of them pull out what looked like a cordless angle grinder, They weren't teenagers tagging a wall. These guys came prepared. I didn't panic. I didn't even sit up. I opened my drawer, pulled out my personal sidearm, and tapped the emergency routine on my system. Silent alarm engaged. Live footage transmitted to county dispatch. Local sheriff pinged directly. Estimated response time, 4 minutes. Then I leaned back and kept watching. The guy with the grinder started working the lower part of the security clasp, trying not to spark too much. They hadn't tripped the standard alarm. They were smart enough to disable obvious systems, but they didn't know about the internal failover sensors I'd embedded last fall. Motion-activated infrared, dual-channel alerts, and one lovely feature I like to call automated witness mode, which meant the moment they stepped inside, they'd be on camera from 3 angles. Sure enough, the door lifted just enough for one of them to slip in, flashlight beam bouncing along the racks. He moved with a purpose, not a looter. He knew what he was after. Suddenly, the outer yard lit up blue and red. Sheriff cruisers tore through the front gate like a SWAT team. 2 black and whites, sirens off but lights blazing, tires skidding slightly on the gravel. Within 10 seconds, the lookout bolted. Bad call. Deputy Sandlin tackled him into the concrete like a linebacker, cuffed him before the guy could finish his first sentence. The other 2. One ducked behind the truck dock, but my motion lights lit him up like a Christmas angel. The last poor bastard inside the warehouse tried to run back out, but got face-to-face with Deputy Molina and the muzzle of her 40th caliber. 3 suspects, 0 escape, all alive, all cuffed, all extremely quiet. I arrived 20 minutes later, still zipping up my jacket, thermos in hand. Sandlin met me near the gate. "You're not going to believe who we've got. Try me." He walked me to the cruisers. 2 of the men were already in the back seats. One was wearing a work shirt with a logo I recognized. Henson Property Services, the contractor Cotton Ridge had used for the last community lawn project. Another guy had HOA security tags still on his belt. And the third was standing beside the cruiser, handcuffed, eyes low. Jerry Lambert, husband of Karen, HOA's unofficial enforcer, though technically just community compliance assistant. Also, idiot. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Guess the family that sues together breaks and enters together. Sandlin gave me a tight look. "You pressing charges? You even need to ask." We spent the next hour walking the scene. They'd cut through a section of rear mesh, avoided the camera poles, jammed the front keycode panel, but none of it mattered. Every step inside 12B was recorded. Every breath, every glance at the inventory, audio, night vision, high res. And best of all, once they'd entered, the system had triggered a live upload to my cloud archive and the sheriff's secure channel. Nothing was getting buried. Back at the cruiser, Jerry finally spoke. "It wasn't supposed to go like this," he muttered, as if that helped. I stepped closer. "You broke into private commercial property with tools, intent, and a team. You knew what was stored inside. That's not an accident. That's a plan." He looked away. "Your wife send you?" No answer, just a twitch in his jaw. Sandlin stepped in. "They're being booked tonight. Burglary, trespassing, attempted theft, possibly conspiracy. We'll know more when we go through the phones." As they hauled the men off, I stood in the middle of my lot, arms crossed, letting the adrenaline settle. They weren't just petty. They weren't just arrogant. They were desperate. And when people like Karen start losing control, they get dangerous. The next morning, my phone lit up like Times Square. Not just the sheriff's department, but reporters, attorneys, even some guy from a local HOA watchdog blog called Suburban Tyrants. I hadn't had that much attention since a Pentagon logistics snafu back in '08. This time, the battlefield was concrete, and the enemy wore yoga pants and pearls. Sheriff Sandlin called me first. His voice was colder than usual. We pulled Lambert's phone. "You're going to want to hear this." I drove straight to the precinct, where he and a detective from the property crimes unit walked me through a series of texts and call logs taken from Jerry's device. I didn't even have to scroll far. Less than 24 hours before the attempted break-in, there was a message from Karen Lambert, sent from her personal number. "Take care of it, quietly. Get our stuff back. Don't let it sit in his storage any longer. He wants court. Give him a break-in instead." Another one, time-stamped 30 minutes later. "Don't text me after. You were never there. If he calls the cops, we'll say it was a misunderstanding." There it was. No ambiguity. No wiggle room. No vague, "this was all a mistake" nonsense. This was a direct order from the president of the HOA to commit a felony. The detective scrolled further. Phone records, deleted voice memos recovered from cloud backups, one where Karen rants about getting even and not letting some private warehouse tyrant hold our community hostage. Her voice, her tone, her crime. By lunchtime, the DA had opened a case file: conspiracy to commit burglary, attempted theft, criminal trespass, and unlawful instruction to commit a crime. Karen Lambert was now the subject of a full-blown criminal investigation. She was arrested quietly that evening. They didn't knock down the door or slap on cuffs in front of the HOA clubhouse, but it hit the county blotter before the ink was dry on the paperwork. By 8 p.m., her mugshot was already circulating on neighborhood Facebook groups like wildfire. Half the comments were horrified. The other half were popcorn gifs and, finally, reactions. By 9, I had 2 TV crews parked outside my warehouse gate. One from Fox 5 Atlanta, the other from a local cable news channel called Metro Wire. The anchors stood in the gravel lot delivering breathless updates in front of the now famous warehouse 12B. I didn't ask for this spotlight, but I wasn't going to waste it either. So when they asked for comment, I gave one. Calm, precise, nothing emotional. When someone thinks community power is more important than property rights, this is the result. I didn't ask for a fight. But I'm not the type to back down from one either. If it takes court, evidence, and handcuffs to remind people that fences mean something, so be it. By the next morning, the Cotton Ridge HOA board was in total freefall. 3 members resigned within 48 hours. The vice president, some guy named Mark, who apparently hated Karen's guts for years, held a live stream to distance the HOA from all illegal activity. It was a disaster. Someone leaked emails showing that the board had known about the truck situation the entire time, but let Karen handle it to avoid pushback. The County HOA Oversight Commission stepped in 2 days later and placed Cotton Ridge HOA under external administrative review. The community bank accounts were frozen. All board activity suspended pending audit. Karen's name was scrubbed from the HOA website like she was a rogue CIA asset. Meanwhile, my lawyer Martin filed a civil suit against Karen personally, not just for trespassing, but for damages related to the break-in, the risk to my inventory, and defamation stemming from her public comments about my business. Karen made bail, of course. Her husband posted it, but her lawyer released a pathetic statement that made it worse. Ms. Lambert deeply regrets how this situation has spiraled. She acted in the best interest of her community. Best interest, my ass. You don't send people with bolt cutters into someone else's building and call it community service. My favorite part, the HOA tried to blame it all on miscommunication, claim that Jerry acted on his own. But the court had the texts, the voice memos, and the smoking gun of HOA arrogance all in Karen's voice. The press ate it up. A columnist from the Cherokee Ledger called it the HOA scandal of the decade. They printed a full-page op-ed titled "The Tyranny of Good Intentions: When Community Power Goes Rogue." People started sending me pictures of their own HOA horror stories, some petty, some dangerous, all following the same pattern: power trips wrapped in pastel blouses and vague threats of community standards. One night I came home and found a 6-pack of beer and a handwritten thank you note on my porch from a fellow business owner who almost lost her bakery to HOA nonsense. You stood your ground. Respect. That meant more than the lawsuits, more than the news. Because in the end, this wasn't about trucks or property lines or even Karen. It was about drawing a line in concrete and saying, no further, not here. 3 weeks after the break-in, I found myself back in court. Only this time, it wasn't civil. It was criminal. The state of Georgia versus Karen Ann Lambert. She sat at the defendant's table in a dark blazer that didn't quite hide the sweat stains under her arms. Her legal team looked thinner now. Just one weary man in a cheap suit. The kind of guy you hire when your last lawyer jumps ship to protect his license. The courtroom was fuller than before. A handful of Cotton Ridge residents sat behind Karen, faces drawn, lips tight. On my side sat Martin, 2 uniformed deputies, and an assistant from the district attorney's office. The energy in the room wasn't tense. It was expectant. Like everyone was waiting for a crumbling tower to finally collapse. The prosecution laid it all out. Clear, professional, lethal. They started with the texts from Karen to Jerry. Played the audio recording where she told him, give him a break-in instead. They even subpoenaed internal HOA emails, revealing that Karen had tried to backdate a fake agreement with my name typed onto it. The timestamp alone was a joke, dated 2 days after the police report. Her own assistant testified that Karen had instructed the staff not to communicate directly with Mr. Reynolds and that she believed he'd fold if pressured enough. When the DA presented my security footage, it was over. 3 crystal-clear angles of Jerry and his crew breaking in, labeling boxes, rifling through the racks before getting arrested on camera. Karen's attorney tried to argue that she didn't explicitly instruct anyone to commit a felony, that her words were figurative and taken out of context. The judge cut him off halfway through. "Let me be clear," he said. "You are suggesting that give him a break-in instead was a metaphor." The lawyer squirmed. "A poor choice of words, Your Honor." "No, counselor, a criminal one." On the 4th day, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict on all charges. Guilty. The sentence, 9 years, with eligibility for parole after 5. Court costs, full restitution, and mandatory community service. Once she got out, the court also ordered the seizure of all personal communications devices used in planning the break-in and the freezing of Karen's HOA-related assets. But the part that mattered most to me? The court ruled that all costs related to warehouse security, item storage, labor, gate damage, and lost business opportunities were to be paid in full by the HOA and Karen jointly. Total awarded $19,200. It wasn't about the money. It was the principle. Every invoice I drafted, every truck I documented, every single late-night legal consult, recognized, official, on the record. When the judge asked if I had a final statement, I kept it simple. Property rights aren't optional. They're not suggestions. They're not something you override with a committee vote or a passive-aggressive smile. I didn't ask to become the poster boy for people sick of HOA abuse. But if that's what this becomes, I'm good with that. Karen didn't look at me once as they let her out in cuffs. Her face was unreadable, drained of color like she couldn't believe the world had stopped orbiting around her front lawn. Outside, a small group of Cotton Ridge residents gathered near the courthouse steps. One of them, a woman I recognized from the news footage, walked over and stuck out her hand. "We're not all like her," she said. "Some of us are glad you pushed back. We voted last night to dissolve the entire HOA board. We're starting over. Without Karen, without any of that power trip nonsense." I shook her hand. "Make it count this time." Martin and I went for coffee after. He looked tired but satisfied. "You know," he said, stirring sugar into his mug, "I've been fighting HOA egos for 15 years. But this is going in my highlight reel." I raised my cup. "To boundaries." He clinked his mug against mine. Literal and metaphorical. I checked my phone later that night. The headline on the Metro Wire homepage read, "HOA Queen goes down in flames. Karen Lambert sentenced in private warehouse heist." Below it was a still frame from my security footage. Jerry mid-run, frozen in the spotlight, with a box of folding chairs in his hands. The comment section was a war zone. Some people were furious, others gleeful, but buried in the chaos was one that stood out. About time someone told an HOA to sit down and shut up. Damn right. A month after the sentencing, I put up a new sign on the outer gate of my property. "Private storage zone, contract access only. Trespassers will be recorded, charged, and exhibited in court." Underneath it, smaller letters read, "Not available for HOA cooperation, ever." Some folks thought it was overkill. Others stopped by just to take selfies with it. I didn't care. I wasn't in the mood to be generous anymore. The last few months had taught me more about modern entitlement than 10 years working in military logistics. You give people a little flexibility, and they assume they're entitled to the whole damn runway. Cotton Ridge looked different now. The HOA was effectively dissolved under external audit. A temporary administrator appointed by the county was going door to door collecting feedback from residents. Last I heard, they were considering converting to a voluntary neighborhood council instead. No dues, no board, just communication. I didn't have much stake in it. I still lived a few acres out of their reach, behind a stretch of pine and a fence built to withstand small arms fire. But every now and then, I'd spot former HOA residents driving past the lot, slowing down near Warehouse 12B. Like it was a tourist attraction. The stuff we confiscated, eventually after legal clearance, I let the county auction it off. Proceeds went toward covering sheriff's department costs and legal expenses, with the leftovers funneled into a small business protection fund. That was Martin's idea, and frankly, a damn good one. I never reopened 12B to neighbor rentals. Not after that mess. It was now on long-term lease to a regional electrical contractor who needed secure storage for transformers and spools. Reliable folks, no politics, pay on time, don't demand free space for the good of the community. The warehouse had never looked better. As for Karen, she'd appealed the sentence, of course. Got denied. Her name now trended in HOA reform forums as a cautionary tale. The Lambert precedent, they called it. Urban planners and real estate lawyers cited it in blogs and LinkedIn posts. I got invited to speak on a podcast titled Don't Tread on My Driveway. I declined. I wasn't interested in becoming a suburban folk hero. I just wanted people to stay on their side of the line, literally and legally. That said, I did end up forwarding all the court materials to the National Association of Independent Storage Owners. Their legal department requested permission to use the case as a training scenario for dealing with hostile third-party use of commercial space. I gave it to them for free. The morning I handed over the files, I stood in front of Warehouse 12B and watched the sun come up over the tree line. The asphalt still had faint marks from where the HOA trucks had parked, though rain and time were starting to wash it away. In their place, I had stenciled 2 words in yellow paint near the bay doors: Evidence Zone. My idea of a reminder, not for them, for me. Because the next time someone like Karen Lambert rolled up with a clipboard and a smile, expecting to bend rules with a favor and a flinch, I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't explain. I'd just point to the sign and maybe, if I was feeling generous, offer them a copy of the court ruling, framed.